Thank you so much, Mindy. Good evening, everyone. My name is Morgan Whitlatch. I'm a senior attorney and the director of supported decision-making initiatives at the Center for Public Representation. And I'm really happy to be here today with two of my favorite people, Jonathan and Nancy Gardner. Jonathan, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, Morgan. Hello, my name is Jonathan Gardner. I am a 22-year-old. I am a cancer survivor and I happen to have autism. I am the co-chair of the Sport Decision Making Coalition in Massachusetts. And my mother?
Yes, so my name's Nancy Gardner, and I am Jonathan's mom, but I am also very privileged to be one of his support people.
Thank you. So we're here today to talk about supported decision-making and supporting youth with disabilities in adulthood. We're going to be sharing information with you first, with a plan to leave plenty of time at the end for questions. If you have questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to put them in the chat so that we can address them. And we look forward to that conversation too. So here are today's topics. I'm going to talk about what legally happens when a person in Massachusetts turns 18. I'm going to talk about what adult guardianship is and what it's not. And I'm going to share my thoughts on why families and supporters should think about other options first. I'm going to share a general definition of what supported decision making is and what legal tools can go with it. And then we're going to turn the conversation over to Jonathan and Nancy, who are going to talk about their own journey with supported decision making. So first off, what happens at age 18? Well, in Massachusetts, when a person turns 18 years old, they become a legal adult. And what that means is the law says they get to now make their own decisions about their health care, education, finances, other personal matters. Parents are no longer allowed to automatically make those legal decisions for the person, even though they could do that all through their child's childhood. And that's true even if the person has a disability. Schools refer to this time as transfer of rights. And transfer of rights can be an intimidating time for families, particularly when they don't know what all their options are for supporting youth and young adults with disabilities in decision making. Parents may be incorrectly told by schools, doctors, state governmental agencies, adult service systems, or healthcare providers and banks that the only way to really remain involved in their child's adult life is to go to court and become a legal guardian. But that is not true. Getting guardianship is a serious step to take, and it's really important to fully understand what it means and what the consequences of it are first. And there are also other options that may work better for the person and for the family without that need for guardianship. I think it's really important for families to know all of what those options are so that they can work with their loved one to choose a path that's going to be the right fit. It's never too early and it's never too late to learn about alternatives to guardianship. So on this slide, I've listed the main legal tools that are related to decision making for adults in Massachusetts. And it's certainly not an exhaustive list, but it's some key ones. And planning and really being prepared for transfer of rights is really important because doing nothing isn't the best idea. The law says your parents' legal relationship with their child changes when that child turns 18. And so you want them to plan. It's a time for planning. Each of these tools on this slide may be needed under certain circumstances to support someone with a disability. However, we all need to appreciate that some of these tools are heavier than others when applied to the person. That's why I have a toolbox on this slide. I really like to think of this as a toolbox. When an adult with a disability needs some support with decision making, there can be a tendency for others to kind of go too quickly down to the very bottom, namely to treat court-appointed guardianship as the default. And while there may be times guardianship is necessary, we need to recognize it as the heaviest tool because of what it does to a person's rights. It involves the court removing the legal rights of a person to act for themselves. And that's a serious step to take, and it can be difficult to undo. So that's why really thinking about what all the options are first before exploring guardianship is what I recommend. So what is guardianship? Let's talk more about what it means for guardianship of adults and what it's not. What is guardianship for adults? It's different from guardianship for a child. And I think some families aren't always told that. Guardianship for adults is really a formal legal process that involves the probate court. The court makes a decision about whether an adult is incapacitated. And if the court makes that kind of determination, it's then going to decide whether someone else called a guardian needs to be appointed to make all or some decisions for that adult. So first off, guardianship involves the court. So if I talk to a parent who tells me that they are the guardian over their son, for example, I always ask them how old the son is. And if they tell me he is 18 years or older, I ask if they've been to court. And if they tell me no, then I know the parent's not, in fact, the legal guardian of the adult son. So parents aren't automatically the legal guardians of their children with disabilities when they turn 18. In order to appoint a guardian, the court has to make some determinations, including whether that person is incapacitated. And that word incapacitated has a special definition under Massachusetts law. An incapacitated person means that someone, for reasons other than advanced age or minority, has a clinically diagnosed condition that results in an inability to receive and evaluate information or make or communicate decisions to such a degree that the person lacks the ability to meet essential requirements for their physical health, safety, or self-care, even with appropriate technological assistance. So the law builds into it the idea that in determining whether or not somebody is incapacitated, the court has to take into account a person may not qualify for the appointment of a guardian because of the assistance that they get. Guardianship means not only going to court, but also getting a court order. And there are different types of court order guardianship arrangements in Massachusetts. And I've listed them on this slide. And I'm doing that so you know it's not a one size fits all. There are many different kinds in Massachusetts, and the judge is really supposed to kind of weigh which one is the one that's really needed in that circumstance. And you'll see on this slide something called Rogers. Some people haven't heard about Rogers, what it is. It's kind of a case that was in Massachusetts that's kind of set up a process that has a special kind of guardianship for what are considered kind of more extreme measures, like the administration of psychotropic medication. And so Massachusetts has even more types of guardianship than some other states do. So the kind of bottom line here is that there are different types of guardianship in Massachusetts, and if the judge decides one is necessary, it really should be tailored to the person's needs. When we talk about capacity, I encourage people to really challenge your perceived notions about what it may mean. And I put capacity in quotes here because I don't really like the term. I think there are lots of misunderstandings about what it means. Capacity really is not an all or nothing determination. It's not based solely on IQ, diagnosis, or so-called developmental age. People can have the capacity to make some decisions, but not others. They may be able to make some decisions at some times, but not others. And they may be able to make decisions only if they get help understanding what their options are. People may not have the capacity to make a complicated decision, like open heart surgery, but they could still have the capacity to pick someone else to make that decision for them. So capacity really does work along a continuum, and it can shift over time. I think equally important is to keep in mind that not having the opportunity to make your own decisions results in a decrease in your capacity over time. Capacity can be a skill that grows in time and practice, and that's something really to keep in mind, particularly when we're talking about 18-year-olds, whether or not they have a disability. They're going to learn to make better decisions over time. Capacity really is not something set in stone. So I talked about what guardianship is. I want to also talk about what it's not. Okay, guardianship is not the only option to consider. Parents may seek guardianship of their children with disabilities for a number of reasons, but it's never too early or too late to think about alternatives. A person may need help making decisions or cycle certain times in crisis and need some support, but that doesn't necessarily mean they need a guardian forever. We all need help making decisions sometimes, and there are many options to consider. Guardianship is also not just a piece of paper. When I say this, it's not like when you get guardianship over someone and you get that court order, your court case is over. The court will become part of the guardian in the person's life for as long as the person is under guardianship. And there are a lot of legal responsibilities when a guardianship is ordered on the guardian. Guardianship does require ongoing reporting and monitoring. Judges can change their mind about who should be the guardian and can order more court hearings and monitoring. And it's that ongoing court oversight it's important to know about. And I've spoken to families who wish they had known about it before they got guardianship. Guardianship is also not all powerful. So when you become the guardian of someone, that doesn't mean you get to control all aspects of their lives. I sometimes see guardians misunderstand the role they're supposed to play. And I remember in 2021 when there was all that press coverage of Britney Spears' conservatorship case, One article said that Britney Spears' father restricted everything from who she dated to the color of her kitchen cabinets. And if that's really true, that's a tremendous overreach. In becoming a guardian, the guardian should not see themselves as being able to take over the entire life of a person. First, doing so isn't consistent with best practices for guardians. Guardians are supposed to involve people in their own decision making. And second, no guardianship should imagine taking away every single decision away from a person. Being a guardian really means that the guardian is able to make certain legal actions or transactions on behalf of the person, like opening a bank account or signing a medical form. It doesn't mean the guardian gets to decide mundane, everyday decisions for a person, like when the person wakes up in the morning, what they eat for breakfast, or what clothes they want to wear, or where they spend every minute of their day. People under guardianship still have human rights. And that's something to kind of keep in mind when we're thinking about all these different kinds of options. I also think sometimes people equate guardianship with safety. Um, and when a parent calls me and they say they want guardianship, I always ask why. Guardianship can be a solution to some problems, but it's not the solution to all of them. So if a parent tells me they want guardianship to keep their child safe, they should know that there are no studies I know about that have found people under guardianship are automatically safer. People under guardianship are still at risk of being hurt or abused and are even more so if they're kind of isolated or segregated from the community. And if they say they want guardianship because they're worried that the child might be arrested, I have to tell them that having a guardian doesn't stop people from being arrested or getting in trouble. The real answer is, why are you worried they will be arrested? And how can you best safety plan with your child in advance of any interactions with police? And guardianship is not without its downsides. I talk a little bit about the court involvement piece of this, but there can also be practical legal consequences to guardianship that you should consider. So, for example, in Massachusetts, if an adult with a disability needs in-home supports that are paid through governmental agencies like DDS, there can be legal restrictions on guardians serving as paid caregivers. And so families should know about that consequence first, particularly if they are going to be getting support from for their loved one with governmental agencies. So why explore other options first? Well, it's the law. Massachusetts has a least restrictive alternative doctrine, which is a fancy way to say that courts are supposed to consider whether a person's needs can be met by less restrictive means before they can issue a guardianship. Guardianship can be time consuming and complex and costly. It's a formal legal process, and you shouldn't forget that. There can be attorneys involved, and navigating those kinds of court processes can take time and money. Guardianships also can be difficult to end or change. If you don't want to have a guardianship anymore, it's up to the judge to decide whether or not to end it or to change it. And not very many judges end guardianships. That's why it's important to think, is guardianship really necessary? If as life changes, it's not the most flexible of tools. Decision making is also a learned skill. I like to say decision making is a muscle. The more you use it, it's going to get stronger. When I was 18, I didn't make the best decisions, but over time we learn from our mistakes and we're guided by people who we trust to help us develop those skills. And people with disabilities should have that option too. Self-determination is also linked to better life outcomes. So, I said I'm not aware of any studies that people under guardianship are safer. I am aware of decades of studies that show people who exercise greater self-determination experience better life outcomes. They're more integrated in their communities. They're more likely to be employed in better paying jobs. They're more likely to identify situations where they could face abuse and less likely to suffer abuse. And, I really think that's something to kind of keep in mind too when we're thinking about why we want to explore options first. So what are those options? We talked about guardianship and what it is and isn't. What are the other options? Here's a list of some of the most main ones. We're going to be focusing on the one on the top, namely supported decision making. But as part of the handout in the PowerPoint, which is a link I shared with Mindy that I hope she shares with all of you, you're going to see keywords to know in Massachusetts, and it's going to define each of these tools. We're going to be talking about some of them today that work with supported decision making, but I want you all to have the information you need if you want to think more about those kinds of tools. The handout also includes a link to information about relevant forms that you might be interested in Massachusetts. And so I really encourage you to take a look at that handout and do a little homework after the training by reviewing that material. So what is supported decision making? You're going to hear from the real experts here. You're going to hear from Jonathan and Nancy soon about what supported decision making is. Um, I have on this slide a technical definition from a model law because I'm a lawyer, okay? And we always are going to look at these kinds of legal definitions, okay? And it defines supported decision making as assistance from one or more persons of an individual's choosing in understanding the nature and consequences of potential personal and financial decisions, which enables the individual to make the decision and in communicating a decision once made if consistent with the individual's wishes. Well, leave it to lawyers to make something really sound complicated. Okay. What does it really mean? Well, supported decision making starts with the idea that people, including people with disabilities, can make their own decisions with the support they choose and want. They can use family, friends, professionals, and other people they trust to help understand the issues and choices they face and ask questions, receive explanations in words they actually understand, and then communicate those decisions to others. It's really what we all do every day. None of us makes decisions in a vacuum without the support of people we trust. But when people with disabilities need some help making decisions, I've seen that they can be seen by others as not being able to make any decisions at all, and it assume too quickly that someone else needs to make that decision for them. Words like guardianship pop up. And so while supported decision making really is human decision making, because I use supported decision making every day, and I don't identify as someone with a disability. I think maybe we give it a special name when it's used by people with disabilities to kind of remind ourselves that they too have the right to ask for help and still make their own decisions. They have the right to be reasonably accommodated in decision making. And some may need more help or more time in understanding or communicating decisions than me, but that should not automatically mean that they don't get to make the decisions for themselves or that someone else has to make decisions for them and instead of them. So that's supported decision making from the law side of things and from how I kind of view it. And I'm trying to translate the legal mumbo jumbo. What is supported decision making not? It's not someone else making decisions for or instead of the person. So if I give a training on supported decision making, and at the end a parent raises their hands and they say, I'm the supported decision maker for my daughter, I know I haven't done my job. The parent should instead see themselves as the supporter of their daughter, who is the decision maker. It's not the person making decisions alone without any help. I think sometimes families are given the impression that the person either is under guardianship or has to make their own decisions without any assistance. And that's not the case. Nobody, as I said, makes decisions in a vacuum, and we shouldn't judge people with disabilities differently. It's not the person making decisions only if their supporters agree. And that's the difference between supported decision making and something some medical professionals refer to as shared decision making. It's also used in the educational context for shared decision making. I kind of call it the curse of too many SDMs. That's why I try not to use too many acronyms. With supported decision making, it's the individual who makes the final decision, and they may ultimately disagree with their supporters' advice. And it's not one size fits all. It looks different for different people. People are different. They have different support networks. They have different communication. They have different strengths and needs. I've worked with people who have very formal supported decision-making arrangements, with a regular SDM team meeting, and they have this written agreement form. And I've worked with people who use it very informally with their families and people that they trust. I've worked with people who use letter boards or pictures to communicate, and I've worked with people who use speech. I've worked with people of like a big, strong network of family and friends to be part of their support network. And I've worked with people who have a couple of really trusted people that they want to help them, or they rely more on professionals to support them. And supported decision making is not only for people with certain kinds of disabilities. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more next, because I really do think that's a kind of common misconception. And when I've kind of had focus group with parents to talk about supported decision making, they've shared, people saying, "Oh, supported decision making won't work because my child has X disability," and so I want to talk a little bit more about that shortly. So here are some common questions I get about supported decision making. First off, is it new? I get this question a lot, I think, because we're seeing more and more states in the United States introduce legislation or formally adopt laws that recognizes that term, supported decision making. And so we've been talking about supported decision making, I would say, as a country, for over about the last decade or so for that reason. But supported decision-making is not new in the sense that it's been formally recognized in our neighbors in Canada for over 40 years. And it's not new in that people use it every day, even if they don't give it that kind of special name. I've worked with lots of families and described supported decision-making, and they said, oh, we do that all the time. We just don't call it that. We didn't know that's what you meant. Who can use it? Common myth about supported decision-making, it's only for people with certain kinds of disabilities, and that's not accurate. I've supported people in using supported decision making with intellectual disabilities, who have lower IQs, who have autism, who have psychiatric or mental health disabilities. I've worked with people who don't use support speech to communicate. I've worked with people who have dementia who have used supported decision making. So when we're thinking about that, let's make sure to really not think of it as being only limited to a certain kind of population. How is it different from guardianship or surrogate or substitute decision making? Well, surrogate decision making or substitute decision making, sometimes it's called, means that someone else is ultimately making the legal decision for the person. So that could be the legal guardian or an agent under their power of attorney or a representative payee if someone gets Social Security benefits. In its purest form, supported decision making means the person is the one making the legal decision. And so those are distinct concepts. But I always say supported decision-making principles and involving people in decision-making that impacts them can and should be incorporated into all of those kinds of models, including guardianship. Is supported decision-making legal? Yes. Supported decision-making is an existing legal option that people can use. And it's true that legislation formally recognizing supported decision-making has not passed in the Massachusetts legislature yet. But supported decision-making has been formally recognized in Massachusetts in other ways. So over a decade ago, Massachusetts was one of the first of a series of formal projects that supported people with disabilities in using supported decision-making in their lives. And that project resulted in the first court order to terminate a guardianship in favor of supported decision-making in Massachusetts in 2015. So that's like a decade ago. In addition, supported decision-making can be seen as a reasonable accommodation for a person's disability under federal and state law. So 100% supported decision-making is legal. It can be used in Massachusetts and it can be used across state lines. Is it safe? Now, as I said, I'm not aware of any studies that prove people under guardianship are automatically safer. But research has shown that people with disabilities who have more control over their lives are better able to avoid and resist abuse. And research has also shown that people with disabilities who have more connections in their community are indeed safer. And so we should encourage those connections by helping them build out the number of supporters that are really involved in their lives. That's how you make people safe. I promised I'd talk about some other legal tools that can be used kind of alongside supported decision making, and you can learn more about these tools under the keywords to know in Massachusetts handout I mentioned. This slide shows some common ones. A person who uses supported decision-making may decide to sign a release of information form that would allow like service providers like doctor's offices or school to share otherwise private information about the person with the person's supporters. So this is called like a HIPAA form, or for healthcare. In school, it's called a FERPA form. And it just helps supporters have the information they need to advise and help the person and really understand the choices and the decisions that they face. The person may also decide to sign a healthcare proxy. And a healthcare proxy, I think we should all be planning using healthcare proxies, regardless of whether you have a disability. A healthcare proxy is a legal document where a person chooses someone else to make healthcare decisions for them if something happens and they can't make those decisions for themselves. So the person would make their own decisions with support when they can, and then they have a safety net in place if they no longer can. A person using supported decision making can also sign a really special kind of power of attorney. It's called a durable power of attorney. Now, a power of attorney is a legal document that lets a person pick someone else to act for them for financial, business, or other legal purposes under certain circumstances. And the person signing the power of attorney can put a start date or an event in the document about when that agent can act for them. So the kind of durable power of attorney I'm thinking of now, one that can be used with supported decision making, is one that authorizes a trusted supporter to handle certain financial, business, or legal matters only if the person is no longer able to do so themselves. And all of these terms, again, are defined in that keyword to know handout. I'm trying to translate some legal terms into more plain language. And of course, I have more tools in that supported decision-making toolbox that you can use. We have some supported decision-making guides So for example, there's a getting started with supported decision making handout that is in the links in Massachusetts. There are also, as I said, forms. We've come up with a sample supported decision making form that can be used in Massachusetts. And you can all see those at the supporteddecisions.org website, which you're going to hear me plug several times. That's CPR's supported decision making website at supporteddecisions.org. I alluded to this, but I think another really powerful tool to use in advancing supported decision making is the Americans with Disabilities Act and Section 5 of the Rehab Act. And those are acts that say people with disabilities have to be reasonably accommodated. There were recent regulations that came out that recognized in the preamble supported decision making was an example of a reasonable modification for someone's disability. And I think that could be a really useful tool if if you want to try to enforce your ability to use supported decision making. And, Jonathan and Nancy are going to talk more about some of the tools that they have in their toolbox in trying to help to enforce their relationship. And we're also seeing national trends with kind of national organizations and governmental policies and practices that have recognized supported decision making. We've seen it recognized by the U.S. Department of Education. We've seen it recognized by uh, really the Social Security Advisory Board. We've seen a lot of different places advise them, and the American Bar Association, which can be very useful in kind of convincing lawyers that supported decision making is a real thing. And so you can go to our website to see more about those national organizations. I have like talked for half an hour, and I'm sure you're pretty sick of hearing from me. I'm really excited to turn this over to Jonathan and Nancy to really talk about what their journey with supported decision making has been. They're the real experts, and everybody's journey is different, and that's what I want to highlight, I think, in the beginning. They're going to share with you how their journey is working. So let's start out with that. So with no further ado, so let's start with Jonathan. Jonathan, hey, so how did you first learn about supported decision making?
Well, I first learned about supported decision making when I was 16. My mom and dad had gone to a few workshops on supported decision making and brought it back to me as an alternative to guardianship. This really mattered to me because I wanted to stay in charge of my own life. Supported decision making allows me to choose the people I trust and to help me think through my decisions while I remain the decision maker. It all made total sense to me. I wanted people to I want people to help guide me, not control me.
And I think this is a wonderful picture that's on this slide where you say here you're with your mom, your dad, your brother in front of the US Capitol.
Yes, yeah, that was when I went to Washington for some testifying and some,
It
guess,
was the Disability Policy Seminar.
yeah, that one.
Yeah. And he
Yeah,
testified for the Autism Care Act and the Education Bill.
Hmm.
oh, wonderful, wonderful.
She keeps track of this stuff.
Yeah.
So, Jonathan, what were your school years like? Is there anything from that time that influenced your decision to use supported decision making?
My school years were hard, traumatic, and long story short, in second grade, I had a teacher who stopped following my IEP and I was bullied. No one listened when I was struggling. I didn't have the words to explain how I felt at the time, and I started hurting myself to try to show I needed help. One day, I tried to jump out of the classroom window. I just didn't want to be there anymore. No child should ever feel that way. After that, I was moved to a new school where I was promised safety, but that school hurt me even more. When I cried or got overwhelmed, I was taken to a timeout room and held down by a teacher. She sat on me, and it made my body feel like it was burning from lava. This happened over and over. I was terrified and I was alone. My mom didn't even know what was happening until she walked in and saw it. She pulled me out of school and started homeschooling me. That's when I finally felt safe. Now I have PTSD from what happened to me in school. I have trouble trusting people even now, but homeschooling helped me heal and slowly learn to trust again. My parents gave me a voice and included me in decisions about my learning and my life. I became the guide of my own education. That experience made support decision making feel like a good fit for me. I knew what it was like to have no control, to not be heard. Support decision making gave me back the control. It helped me feel respected, safe, and in charge of my life again, with support from people I trust.
Quite a journey. And I see here a picture of you with one of your friendship supporters, who
Yeah,
was,
Brendan. The
yeah.
things I could tell about him, but,
No, no.
but let's not go into those stories today.
Yeah.
But he's one of my closest friends, and honestly, he helped me out a lot back in the day and helped open me up.
He was the first person, Jonathan, when he was traumatized, didn't leave our house for over 2 years. He was the first person that Jonathan really let in and was able to take him out without me in the community. And it just was the beginning of something great.
What,
And,
what,
you know, he let Jonathan also guide him of, he never pushed Jonathan to be like, I'm here and we got to go out. It's what I'm supposed to do. You know, he just let Jonathan
Mhm.
be his own guide.
what a powerful connection.
Yeah. It was just like natural that he would become a support person after. So,
That's so wonderful. And that kind of leads in wonderfully to my next question. Jonathan, how do you pick your supporters? Like, has that changed over time?
I pick people who know me well, who respect me and believe in my ability to be the guide of my own life. My mom, dad, and brother were the first people I chose. Over time, as my life evolved, I added other people who I trusted in different areas of my life, like healthcare, work, friendship, finances, mental health, girls, and etc. Some supporters have changed over time, and that's okay because my life changes over time. What matters most in a supporter is trust and mutual respect. And this is actually the perfect picture for that,
yeah.
Mr. Stickney. So Mr. Stickney and I started our friendship over a little business I had back in the day. It was a baking business where I would bake pies for people. And it was actually a pretty good one, but that's besides the point. So we started off with a more transactional thing. I would start off in the car and all that stuff, and wouldn't really go out since I was still very shy. But over time, it was going in, and eventually, over a lot of time, it became less about transactional, just hanging out with the guy and just having fun. I think was it earlier? No, it was early last year, I want to say. We went and saw a couple of movies together, and it was some of the funnest times, honestly.
It just, and that,
Wonderful.
it became a natural friendship. It was built on trust. And again, Jonathan going at his own pace. And Mr. Stickney used to Jonathan, it was a big deal for Jonathan even to get in the car with me and drive over to his house. And we would roll down the window and Jonathan would hand him his pie and Mr. Stickney would hand him his money and say thank you. And that was it. But we just kept building on it and it just built into something that we never really even expected. And he, um, he's a retired financial
Advisor.
advisor, so he loves to talk finances with Jonathan and teaches him and I when I'm around there some really good advice.
I think I've learned a lot about stocks.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. And that journey is so wonderful to hear.
Mhm.
So, Jonathan, what do you think makes a good supporter?
Uh, what makes a good supporter is listening without judgment. They don't try to take over or push their own ideas on you. They help you understand your options, ask good questions, and stand by you no matter what. They see you as a person with potential, not someone who needs to be fixed. Most of all, they help you feel safe and respected when you are going through something hard. And oh,
And I see this is a picture of you with your supporter, Adam, who helps you with friendship.
yes,
Oh, he's your wingman. Oh, I
yeah,
got
he and my wingman, the famous one for that one. But, but oh my God, there's not enough good things I can not say about Adam, but I'll try to keep this as short as possible. Uh, this was my first wrestling live event, and it was somehow perfectly timed with that picture. I still don't know how we did that, but that's besides the point. Um, Adam has helped me in so many ways. He's helped me become more confident in some types of ways. He's helped me become more of a advocate and more understanding of the disability world entirely as well. He's not disabled, just he works in the field as well. And honestly, he's just honestly one of my best friends. Like if you were to call him up right now and ask him his what he who his top five friends are, I think I would be pretty much on that list somewhere at least. But yeah, I just appreciate the guy so much
Yeah.
for not only being able to take me out, but just enjoying my company and my craziness.
That's wonderful. So tell me a little bit more. What kind of support do you get from supporters when you make decisions? I mean, it sounds like you have different supporters for different decisions.
Yes. Sometimes I need help breaking down complex information like medical details, work information, or financial help. Other times I may need emotional support or friendship advice. My supporters help me think through pros and cons and make sure my voice and choice is respected. With support decision making, I always get to make the final decision, which is pretty ironic for who we're actually talking about right now. Mrs. Clifford. Oh my God, there's a lot I can say about her. She's helped me for so long. She was a therapist at the high school of East
Yeah,
Bridgewater,
yeah,
but still, even now, she's still just basically has become more of a family friend at this point, and still a therapist to me. Honestly, I generally can't say enough nice things about Mrs. C. Uh, all that stuff.
yeah. And Jonathan, when anxiety or worries or something just gets to a point where he doesn't feel he can handle it, he knows at any time we can reach out to Mrs. Clifford.
Yeah,
And really, honestly, anytime we've reached out at really bad times, and she's always supported Jonathan through it. So
yeah,
it's wonderful.
yeah, without any judgment.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. That's what you said, a key characteristic of a good supporter for you.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Judgment. So, Jonathan, in your intro, you mentioned having cancer. Were there any challenges in navigating the medical system, and how did you use supported decision making during that time? How did it impact your experience?
Yes, starting chemotherapy was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I lost my hair, my strength, and sometimes my hope. Midway through treatment, I hit a breaking point. I told my mom I didn't care if the tumor killed me. I just wanted the suffering to stop. That's when supported decision making truly saved my life. My mom came back to me not as a parent, but as a supporter. She said to me, if you can put your faith in me as your support person, I'll help you figure this out. I gave her permission to talk to my medical team, and together they developed a plan, that took care of both my physical and mental health. After talking through it with my supporters and getting my questions answered, I agreed to a plan I picked, and it saved my life. Supported decision making gave me the power to choose when and how I would continue treatment. I wasn't just a patient, I was a person who had a choice in how his treatments would be done. And that made all the difference.
Wow.
And and those crazy two right there to bring up the mood a little bit. uh, those are my grandparents. I love them dearly. They they always wanted to see me whenever I could during my cancer treatment. Still do. Now we go over like I don't know, like every other week now. But yeah, I think that's coming from one of the appointments actually.
That was your last day of radiation. They needed to
Yeah, they need.
convey to hug you because they weren't allowed in the hospital.
Yeah,
So we drove over there
yeah,
and yeah.
yeah.
Wow.
And
Wow.
they help you a lot, like
With my
your
faith,
faith.
yeah, my faith. We have always some interesting conversation about the Judaism and all that type of
Yeah,
stuff. What's the other one that I have? Protestantism,
yeah,
Protestant,
Protestant.
Protestant. I can't speak today,
That's okay.
but yeah, we
I think
always
you're
have.
doing pretty well here.
Thank
And
you.
I love that picture. That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing these wonderful pictures. Um, so Jonathan, where do you think you'd be without supported decision making?
Well, without support decision making, I would have been forced into decisions without being ready. During cancer treatments, I might have shut down or even refused care entirely. I would have ended up in guardianship or a place where no one truly listened to me. If I had survived, I'd be a shell of who I am now. But instead, supported decision making helped me stay connected to myself, my body, and my choices. It gave me hope. It saved my life. And uh, and this person right here is actually another work slash advocacy supporter, Anna. She is a love and truly one of the greatest people I've ever met. And actually, funny enough, the person that got me into this type of work about advocacy and all that stuff, I it was actually while I was still in radiation when I
Mm.
met her. I'll just tell this quick little story. But so when I was going into it, when I first was asked to do something about supported decision making about some bill stuff, I was like a little bit like, I don't know, politics are well, politics.
Mhm.
But after a little bit, my mom convinced me to at least hear her out for a little bit, and I can never be more grateful for her for doing that. So we got back from one of the treatments or something of that
Mhm.
other. And we jumped on the Zoom call a little bit anxious, and well, I met her. And instead of being all politicky or anything like that, it was all heart. And that is something I can never be truly grateful from from that point of view. And well, from there we just started bonding, and well, that happened.
Yeah, and
Oh,
she's introduced you to some other wonderful
Yeah,
people like
I lo-
Morgan.
like more like you, Morgan. Actually, funny enough.
that's absolutely right. I remember the first time that when I saw you testify, and then the second time I saw well, the first time I saw you testify, you from the treatments, you didn't have any hair, and so I didn't know what color your hair was. And the second time you testified was the following year, and I learned you had red hair, like me. So it was,
We're
I'm
the
really
luck of the Irish.
well, like exactly. No, I remember that too, and it's wonderful to, that's another thing to think about too, right? Supporters can introduce you to other supporters, and I think that's how your network can grow, right?
Mhm.
And it just to jump back for a second, Jonathan's mental health therapist was actually the one that introduced him, both of us, to Mr. Stickney, because he used to bring her pies to thank her for all her guidance. And he was over her house one day, their family friends, and she served the pie. And he's like, I need to meet this young man. And that's how, and it just evolved. It was wonderful.
And that's what, I'm talking about, like creating networks and
Yeah.
expanding those kinds of networks. This is just a really practical example of how it can really work in real life. Because that's what makes people being part of a community, being part of a broader network is what really can help people, and makes people safer. Um, so I love that, those examples. So has supported decision making changed your relationship with your supporters in any way, Jonathan?
Yes, it has brought more clarity and respect into our relationships. Instead of people stepping in to take over when things get hard for me, they walk beside me and support me to figure things out. For example, my mom used to always be in fix it mode for me. Now she is truly my supporter who helps guide me to give me a second, to guide me and supports me even when I make a decision that does not turn out good. She does not fix the decision for me. She is just there so I can learn from it because I feel as human beings, we all learn best from mistakes.
Wow. I always say that too. I think that's a real characteristic of a good supporter is that they leave room for mistakes and they help you in the aftermath of those while respecting your decision. I think that's wonderful. And I see in this picture, this is Miss Nicole.
Yes, Miss Nicole, who is probably somehow watching this in the future, but
Oh, she loves story.
Yeah, she always watches my thing. So hi, Past Jonathan says hi. But
Uh,
anyways, but Miss Nicole was my speech and therapist
yeah,
teacher back in the day.
way back in the
Way
day
back in the day when I still had more hair than
when
I
you were
currently.
little.
Yeah, when I was little. But over time, we started connecting, and you could see that eventually she became my supporter. And well, recently she's had a daughter,
And now what are you?
and now I'm an uncle.
Oh, wow. That's
Yeah.
wonderful.
And he actually, her wedding was the first wedding we went to, and it was so lovely because just she knew that Jonathan would have a hard time staying for the whole event with the music and everything. So she made sure that there was a space for us to see her after the ceremony, and then we just could leave, and that was all okay because she just supported him so that he could be there as much as he wanted to be, and it was just great.
That's wonderful. So you touched a little on this, but how do you choose supporters for your supported decision-making plan, Jonathan?
Well, then, give me a second. I had moved down a little bit of a page. uh, I choose people who believe in me and that I trust. They're people who are patient and open-minded and willing to listen and support. I look for people who know how to support without taking control and who aren't afraid to let me know, to let me make my own choices, even when it's hard. I have known Morgan for years now and met her during an advocacy for support decision making. I had the chance to meet her in person when I was advocating in Washington, D.C., and well, it felt like the perfect time to ask her to be one of my supporters. I did this because I trust her and respect her. It just felt natural, and I'm so happy she agreed, and I go to her for work and advocacy advice.
And there's a picture of us together in DC.
Yeah, that's the moment that it actually happened.
That was when it happened,
Yeah,
right then.
right then, right then and there.
Right then and there. So, what do you want families to know about supported decision making, Jonathan?
I want families to know that support decision making is not about letting someone make all their decisions alone. It's about supporting them and trusting them to lead their own life. I believe everyone has the right to be heard, to be respected, and to evolve as human beings, even in the hardest moments. Like going through cancer, supported decision making can be a life saving tool. To me, supported decision making is about dignity, freedom, and support, not control. Everyone deserves the chance to live their best lives, no matter their disability, communication style, or support needs. Everyone should have the right to make choices about their own lives. And here
And
I
here
am.
you're living your best life right here, right?
Yeah, yep. I'm wave my hands in the air like I just don't care.
Terrific. So let's turn to Nancy. Nancy, did anyone ever encourage you to become Jonathan's guardian? Can you tell us more?
Yes. So when Jonathan was 16, I went to our special education director. Jonathan still receives services, even though I homeschooled him. He got IEP services. And I went in to inquire about next steps before he turned 18. He told me I should choose guardianship because Jonathan was on medication. And what would I do when he does not want to take it anymore? I know Jonathan. I knew that no piece of paper would ever make him take medication, so I began looking to see if there were other choices. I found a workshop being held on supported decision making, and I went. I was so excited about this option that I brought my husband to the next one, and together he and I brought the idea to Jonathan. Since we were basically doing this already in our lives, we decided it was worth trying. And the people who held the workshop are now our dear, dear friends. And together we all go around and we share our lived experience about supported decision making together.
Wow. And I see in this picture, here's Jonathan in the
Yep.
homeschool room on the first day of seventh grade.
Yep. And he was just, again, even his learning was tailored to his he was guiding me. We never rushed through anything that he wasn't ready for.
That's wonderful. So, what is your role as Jonathan on Jonathan's supported decision making team, Nancy?
So I am honored because it's not like it was just going to be, oh, she's my mother and I'm going to be his support person. But Jonathan asked me to be one of his support persons, and my role, as he calls it, is a supporter of everything to him. Um, I help him gather, mostly this is what I do. I help him gather information, think through his choices, and talk things out. We make a lot of pros and cons lists, and then the decision is his choice. And I'm here to help make sure he has what he needs to feel confident and supported when making a decision, whether it's about his health, his work, or his daily life. And this was a picture of us, his last day of radiation, and that was just a few weeks before he had that terrible decision to make. Are we going to continue with our treatments or not? And just, I was so glad that he allowed me to speak with his medical team to figure out something, give him another option. Because life is full of options. So,
And I just noticed how bloated I was in that photo. Wow.
well, it was the drugs.
Yeah, I know, but I just noticed it.
Oh,
I think it's a wonderful photo. One of really
Yeah,
It is.
I think Daddy took it. He must have.
Someone
Someone took it.
So Nancy, and I get this question a lot. If Jonathan wants to make a decision that you don't agree with as a supporter, like what do you do?
So this has been hard at times, especially, as a mom, I have to divide myself a little bit and separate myself. And it was especially hard during cancer. Many providers just assume that I am Jonathan's legal guardian. And I have to explain that I am a support person, not the one making the decisions, supporting them. We often had to educate the doctors and the nurses about supported decision making when he was sick. We explained that Jonathan was the decision maker and my husband and I were the support people because he wanted us to be there. We needed to be there to support him, not as his parents. Over time, his care team learned how powerful supported decision making is. They witnessed it firsthand, and they've continued to support and respect Jonathan for using supported decision making. And this picture was so great because it was just taken last week, I think, at a hearing that Jonathan and I were at. And he had such a long day, and he said to me, usually he goes up and he testifies by himself, and he's just like, you're going to have to come. He had done a training in the morning, and we were waiting and waiting hours for him to testify. And he's like, you're going to have to come and sit next to me just in case I need you to take over. And so, there I was for support. Of course, he did not need me. But
I needed the support. You were there for
I
questions.
was there for, to help out and to process questions or whatever, he needs. So I think you felt good that I was there to do that. I felt good that you asked me.
Yes.
That's wonderful. So I think you were talking a little bit about the cancer treatments, and you talked about this too. Do you have anything else you wanted to add about really trying to make sure that you're recognized as a supporter and not as decision maker?
Yeah. So the biggest lesson that I think you messed me up on my slides, but that's okay.
No, that's okay. I think you're one slide in advance, but that's okay.
Yeah. So I don't know, he's doing that, but that's okay, hon. Where am I?
This was what you just did.
Oh, yeah, that's a good.
Yeah, I think this is what you just did. Now,
doesn't matter.
Well, I thought it was helping.
No.
Why don't you tell us about the picture a little bit?
Yeah. So this is a picture of two of Jonathan's cancer nurses, Judy and Christina, and they really just respected the whole process. Their mindset was their job was to make Jonathan better. They didn't care how they were going to do it. They were going to do it any way that he wanted. And that's how his treatment has continued to be, whether we go through scans that sometimes don't come out the way we all want, or test results, or all these things. It's definitely a team effort. And I will say it's the first time being a mom and a support person that Jonathan and I have seen what a true team does. It was overwhelming how they not only wanted his opinion and validated it, they took it really seriously and developed plans around his choices and what best suited him. And that provided the best care, the best care. It was unbelievable.
That's wonderful. And do you mind if we go back to this prior slide and you just talk a little bit more about like when there's disagreements, when Jonathan makes a decision you don't agree with, what do you do?
So we'll make like sometimes we'll take a notebook out and we draw a line, we'll make pros and cons and like what are some of the things that could happen if you decide to buy this very expensive thing for your computer. Which is a real story. And so like we've made pros and cons. We've looked at his bank account and okay, well then, you want to be able to buy this other video game at the end of the month, you know, will you have the money? You'll have to make that decision. What is more important to you? And we list the pros and cons out. And at the end of the day, what did you do?
I bought the thing.
He bought the thing, and that was his decision. And that's okay. And I mean, I make decisions. I may go to the store and buy a new pair of shoes. My husband's like, what are you doing? Like, you got enough shoes. And but it was my decision. I wanted to spend that money. And we all have to budget and do different things for ourselves that, you know, make make things better. But I don't, as a supporter, I don't go into my wallet then and say, here, Jonathan, take the extra money so that you can go have the video game. I'm not going to fix it for him. And as a parent, that's definitely a fine line, I feel, but it's one that I've evolved with. Um, and I feel like it makes our relationship better.
Mhm. It helps me with the budgeting and everything like that.
Yeah,
So.
and he moving forward, when I'm not here one day, I know that he'll have these tools to help him decide, should I buy a new video game or should I buy some food? You know, what's more important
Computer
right now?
part.
Yeah, computer part or whatever it is. But it's really about trust in figuring out. He likes to see in black and white the pros and cons, and he thinks about them, and it's really made him more confident and more. I see your self-esteem growing more, and it's projected into like the advocate he is now, into all facets of life. I've seen him grow and evolve. My husband has, into just a great young man. Like, that is, we all make mistakes. I make mistakes all the time. I make choices that we shouldn't be doing, whether it's eating an extra piece of cake or something. It's, we all do these things. And I think having that support, I know he supports me all the time, so is just great.
Mhm.
Wonderful. So what's the biggest thing you've learned as Jonathan's supporter, Nancy?
So the biggest thing I've learned is when people are supported and respected, they grow. Like I just said, I've seen Jonathan become more confident, more independent, and more powerful in his own life and his work. He teaches me something every day. Um, it's not just me saying, "Oh, here's some ideas." He's giving back too. It's just, I don't know. We have a very unique relationship because of that. And it's not always easy to step back and just support, but it truly, truly does make my heart happy knowing he's in charge of his own life and gaining tools and strategies to figure out what works best for him. He's just become a great sense of support for me and for others. I know his other support people, like they love him. Like right before this call, Anna called because she just needed a little pat on the shoulder too. It's nice. It's building lifelong connections is really what it is. It's a great way to go about it.
Well said. And this is a picture from an international conference that you were picked to go to, right, Jonathan?
Yes.
Yes.
Because he didn't
Yeah.
have to pick me, but he did. I was glad because we had a great time.
Mhm. Nintendo Land
Wonderful.
wasn't open.
He didn't get to go to Nintendo Land because it wasn't open yet. But
Oh, no. So Nancy, what do you want families to know about supported decision making?
so I want families to know that supported decision making isn't about letting go of your loved one. It is another way to support them if they choose you. To me, supported decision making is about recognizing that your loved one can be the decision maker in their own life while still having the support of trusted people they've chosen. As family members, we can stay involved, guide, and support without needing to take away their rights. There are other alternatives to guardianship, and supported decision making offers a way to protect, empower, and respect our loved ones as the human beings they are to make their own choices and decisions. And this is a picture of our two dear friends that we go around. They were the ones that taught us all about supported decision making, and they now they're part of our lives too. So it's just really brought us all together and knowing that, you know what, everyone deserves to make those decisions. I wouldn't want to take away Jonathan's rights.
Mhm. And then here's your supported decision-making team, Jonathan, with some of those great pictures you showed and some other ones too.
Mhm.
Oh, I see me down there too.
Yep,
Yeah,
you're down there.
yeah.
Hard to fit them all into a collage.
There you go. I love it. I love it. Well, it just really shows a network that's grown, you know. It's like what you said, Jonathan, you know, it started out small with your family and now look, it's grown to include other people, and friends. Now, this next slide is the handout slide I talked about with the PowerPoint link, which is in the chat too. We have a tool that is about learning about supported decision making. It's like a one-page flyer. Getting started with supported decision making in Massachusetts. We have a resource list with resources and forms for Massachusetts families, and they include a sample supported decision making agreement form and instructions for Massachusetts residents. And we have some keywords to know in Massachusetts. I think when we have these kinds of discussions, sometimes legal terms come up, and this is a way of trying to explain what all those different legal terms mean. And then we're going to open it up for questions. I picked this picture just because when I look at it, it gives me hope. You know, I think we're all here to kind of learn from each other. I've certainly learned from Jonathan and Nancy, and I hope you have too. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can get to our question and answer period.
Thank you so much, Morgan and Jonathan and Nancy. It was great hearing from all of you. I'm going to stop the recording now so the question and answer portion will not be recorded. Let me stop.